Well, I wanted to find a nice place to film today's Who the hell is this? The Martin Pariseau fella. This one's actually filmed on the day I'm posting it. So yeah, it's hard to find beautiful natural places because I'm among the people primates, the Homo communia. Here's my motorhome back there. But the the people that are hanging around here, even if they're not specifically I don't know what word to use. I could use a few. It's still the language they have with each other and the younger kids around it is horrible. But like this is an area where there's natural shade. So in the last 24 hours, my vehicle is started every time. That means I have the advantage to not being stuck in the sun. Or even if it starts, it stalls so much that it's not even worth moving it to the shade without risks. So I've had to adapt the way I've driven to maybe not do my signal lights so much or do rolling stops more, because not just for me but for inconveniencing other road users. So it's been a day of the vehicle starting. So the trauma of the past week that I didn't even want to talk about in vlogs has kind of gone away a little bit. But I can tell you that my vehicle was towed twice in the same week, and many things were fixed one after the other. It was always something new. And the vehicle needs to start. If there's, we're entering a heat dome and there's a fire, I don't have my motorcycle. Speaking of motorcycle, again, no public transport. The plane tickets are overly priced. I was joking I should go to Cuba, come back to the other part of BC, it'd be cheaper. So again, who do you arrest for this? And, I could have earlier maybe cut the back of my motorhome that I could bring the motorcycle in, but I still have a dream to be a little bit more off the grid, that, those electrical things in case I get solar panels again in the future. Because I can't depend on the altruism of others or bartering as a hard worker all of my skill sets. That doesn't seem to work. Speaking of all the funding that goes to places, like let's say BC or federal public servants go on strike for more money. They don't go on strike because they don't get praise for their high quality work, let's say. Well, I mean, isn't that a great time to not just give more money, but to evaluate their work? And that means firing some people, because if work of quality develops, then of course you need less staff, right? Because either the work will be better done by the people that, let's say, show up for work instead of working from home, but also they come up with ideas, if they're good at their job, for keeping quality but kind of making it more efficient, right? Same thing like when governments invest in things. Like the last job I had lasted a tiny bit, not as long as I thought. I knew it was not going to last long. I said, don't use me in the wrong ways when you hire me, and sure enough they did. Don't try to domesticate me or colonize me, sure enough they did. I appreciate the 2 paychecks I got. It helped fix things, but I still owe some money to a guy that I'll give this week for the motorhome, about $250 additional cost of repairs, and he's given me a good price. And his neighbors help, so now I want to try to get the neighbors to do my front brakes so I can pay them at some point, because they didn't get paid for all the help they gave. So that's nice. But also, I owe 2 more payments for my laptop, which is $266. Now, 1 more paycheck at that place, I would have had enough for that. But the thing is, again, is I'm an Homo sapien. So, I'm transparent. I'm who I say I am. I don't fake my ethics, my values, my principles, my standards. So, of course, I can see when people do. Let's say there's an interview and there's 3 people, it's easy to read. So I will now say, this is who I am. You're really getting this. So don't, if you hire me, don't do this. Don't expect this. I won't conform to low quality. I really will be client-centered. I do really want to retrain your staff in things that'll be helpful for their lives, for when they come to work, and also for the clientele. So please take advantage of it. And again, it didn't work. So let's say governments invest money. Well, when they invest money, let's say for communities, let's say First Nations or other vulnerable communities, like that are predominantly in this park here, but it's where there's natural shade, then they should monitor for quality. They should have staff, public servants, come see how's this money spent. Not once a year, more often than that. And what's the quality and what are you changing? Here's what we recommend. What are you working on to improve the quality of this clientele that you serve and how you're using these funds? And because it's just moving money around, there's no humanity. So if you don't believe in the Anthropocene, by the way, like I do, is come to a park like this and see the state of the human condition. Now imagine traveling in forests or on the border of forests, where you'd see other primates or animals also, like let's say homeless or in need of assistance or in a vulnerable state. It's not because they cause this, it's because we cause this, right? The Anthropocene, right? We cause that to the other animals. But where did the other animals ever cause the state of the human condition that I could observe here? And do you guys realize that I've met a lot of tree planters, but do you realize that when you plant a tree, you can't access the shade of that tree unless you're an ant the first year? And ants are actually more useful a species than the one I share DNA with on this planet. But the thing is trees during this heat dome that's May, that's starting, that's already going to be hard on people. Now at least I can start my vehicle and bring it in the shade once in a while and tolerate less heat. But I did buy some distilled water today, and I'm going to try to drink more. So yeah, so my hardships are really related to being an Homo sapien among the Homo communion. I did my due diligence today. On the weekend I called relatives and interacted with them, but it was important I also say things they need to know, which is related, let's say, to what family values should be, and and this is what the winter's been like for me, because here's the difference between a relative and a family member. Family and relative is different. I talked to a French lady that I think is planting trees here. There's a few from Quebec, and they say, well, to plant trees in Quebec it's very different for a few reasons. One of them is you work really hard, and one of the ways you get satisfaction is knowing these long days is you get a decent paycheck. Well, not in Quebec. So they'll come all the way here, and I'm telling them, yeah, there's a lot of jobs in Quebec I was applying for, and it's like $19, $20, maybe $21 an hour, while it's $27 to $35 for the same job description in other. And of course, they don't know what the French word for accountability is, which means they're part of the problem. But I don't mean people that are not part of the problem. And that could be people that, let's say, love their kids like you wouldn't believe, except they don't get that they are the participants of cultures that do not allow their kids to exceed them. This is something that is measurable because of HSD during a lifetime. This is a generation where you can measure super high percentages of parents who probably more unconsciously, but when you tell them this is what happens with their choices, will continue, so it becomes a conscious choice, that they do not make the decisions that would be selfless as a parent, not selfish, but selfless. It would be not parent-centered, but child-centered, to make sure their children self-actualize, learn, evolve, develop psychologically, and also the personal development to exceed their parents. That's the job of a parent. I have yet to meet parents who win awards, who work as educators, who do not act in many of these ways, where they keep their kids down in a generation where their children will need to have 10 times the intelligence, the skill sets, the endurance, the resilience that they have. And yet they're keeping them down and don't see this. Would have been interesting if I had kids, but again, I said before, it's only in my 30s that I finally developed enough myself to have become a good dad. And at that point, I said, well, it's hard to find somebody to co-parent with that I would believe is a good fit to be a parent. So the idea of having my own child is kind of... So that doesn't mean I'm not available to help other children. And often I just offer it for free in relation to these services that I offer others, that they offer me, such as, repair on my motorhome. And no, nobody's taking advantage of it. Even if I say, no, you be there, you need to be there. You need to see what I'm doing. Ask me how I got the success with your children. And really, you need to ask yourself why you're still hesitating to not book more appointments with me if you love your child as much. So that's pretty much the state of the human condition. And this is who I am living among you today. And it's pretty sad what I see in parks like this. And I don't know if it's the nicest park, but I don't think I want to cook food here in the shade where I am. I might go look for other shade. It's just depressing what I see. It's not just, the industry that creates rivers that look unnatural and unhealthy like this, but it's just knowing eventually even these trees will be cut down. and they need to be here, as a barrier of structure, for one thing, not just shade or the thing they do that is important to us that breeds oxygen. And still so many people, although trees have been here before our species, don't understand all the things trees do as a tree, but also how they communicate among themselves, how they work together to maintain their ecosystem in a stable way. And again, why would we naturally understand this about trees when our behavior is to actually destabilize ecosystems? That's the species I belong to, and I know this, and that's why I was telling relatives recently is, with the week I had, most people would have gotten pretty quick into depression. The thing is, though, is one day at a time. I just go in cruise control. I know I lived during the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is caused by the 99.99% of you. And I don't go in depressions anymore. My depressions in the past, aside from my grandfather dying, it was a lot about how my life would crash based on the interactions I had with the norm. And the norm, even the noblest of doctors, you would say, would get me to question myself, what's wrong with me, when really it wasn't what's wrong with me. It was what's wrong with the norm. So again, my theory and my own personal healing are very much interconnected. My understanding of the behaviors of the norm that brought about the Anthropocene has cured me. That doesn't mean I don't feel sad or a depressed thought or feeling never comes, but I don't have to worry about a real depression lasting a long time because I know I'm not one of the bad guys, the 99.99% of you, that has created what would be, and let's say there's a God. Let's say some of you are religious. If there's a God and he's really wise and he wants to evaluate what we deserve after our mortal lives, wouldn't he put us, or she or it, in a paradise as a species? And again, you're assuming that every individual life can be assessed in this way, because you can't have individual lives and a species be assessed. So it would be more of a species scenario for this God. Did I get this species that I created right? Because I'm going to put them in paradise and see how they leave it at the end of their mortal lives, or at the end of the species' particular duration of time. Well, yeah, so what kind of God would send a species, or members of a species, let's say that recycled more, or let's say that cycled more instead of, cars, or that lived a minimalist life, but that never criticized their own species like I do? What does God say, yeah, you deserve to get into a better heaven than the one I already brought your species in before you screwed it up? I don't know. For me, if there's a God and you want to say omniscient and omnipotent and all wise and use the word paradise, well, I'm pretty sure that 70,000 years ago, and even 30,000 years ago, or since the last ice age for sure, if you understand the concept of physics, chemistry, the astronomy, biology, evolutionary science, it's so amazing, whether there's a God or not, that land mammals like us had a chance to be on such a big place like this with other animals to coexist in a stable system that is maybe unique in our galaxy or the universe. It's so amazing that even if we invent a God, that how can we explain this unless a God? Well, how can you explain the Anthropocene unless your God failed at creating you as a species, or your thinking is so flawed? What's the use? What's the use myself, the Homo sapien, interacting with you without you eventually hitting these blocks where, I can see how you're disconnected from reality. So my connection from reality and my choices, whether, I lose a job or I lose an opportunity or my hardships continue, they still keep me sane among the insane. And I don't have to worry about depressions, and I don't have to worry about madness or dementia compared to 99.99% of you.